You are using your subconscious mind every single day, every single moment, whether you realize it or not. In fact, you've been using it your entire life with perfect consistency and unwavering faithfulness. And here's the shocking truth that most people never discover. Most of the time, you're using this incredible creative power against yourself, programming limitation instead of abundance, struggle instead of success, fear instead of faith. People around the world believe that miracles are rare, extraordinary events that happen only to special people in unique circumstances. They are not. Miracles are not random acts of divine favoritism or lucky breaks that fall from the sky. They are simply the natural result of perfect alignment between your thoughts, your words, and your deepest beliefs working together in harmonious cooperation with universal law. The subconscious mind is the invisible bridge that holds all these elements together, the sacred meeting place where consciousness meets creation, where intention transforms into manifestation, where the invisible becomes visible through the mysterious power of belief made manifest. Before we dive deep into this life-changing understanding, please hit the like button if this message is already resonating with something profound within your soul. Your engagement helps this transformative knowledge reach more people who desperately need to understand the creative power of their own subconscious mind. And make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on, because I'll be sharing more revolutionary teachings that can completely transform how you create your reality. Most people never manifest what they truly want, never experience the life they dream about, never create the reality they desire, because they speak doubt while trying to believe. They pray earnestly for change, pouring their hearts into desperate requests for divine intervention, but then immediately repeat words filled with fear, limitation, and defeat. They sabotage their own prayers with contradictory speech, undermining their requests with negative declarations. And the subconscious mind, that faithful servant of your consciousness, listens not to the surface desire you express occasionally, not to the hopeful wishes you voice when you're feeling optimistic, but to the repeated commands hidden underneath your conscious awareness. The consistent patterns of thought and speech that dominate your inner dialogue day after day. When Florence Scovel Shinn began to teach this profound understanding, she witnessed people transform their lives in ways that seemed miraculous to outside observers. Not through exhausting willpower that depletes your energy, not through frantic hustle that burns you out, not through forced action that feels like swimming upstream, but with a fundamental shift in consciousness that changes everything from the inside out. A shift that starts the moment you stop letting logic and fear control your words and emotions. The moment you recognize that your inner dialogue is either creating the life you want or reinforcing the life you're trying to escape. There is no neutral ground in the realm of consciousness. You are always creating something through the consistent patterns of your thoughts and words. This is not about superficial positive thinking that ignores reality or pretends problems don't exist. This is about speaking truth with unwavering conviction over and over again, impressing your desires so deeply into your subconscious mind that it has no choice but to obey and manifest what you've programmed it to create. In this comprehensive video, I'll show you exactly how the subconscious mind actually works beyond surface level understanding, how it responds to your inner state rather than your outer effort, how it operates according to specific laws that you can learn to work with instead of against. And I'll share several real examples from people whose lives changed completely the moment they aligned their words with their beliefs and started speaking in harmony with their desires instead of their fears. But before we explore these transformative principles, you must understand this fundamental truth that will revolutionize your entire approach to manifestation. Your subconscious mind doesn't care what you want consciously. It doesn't respond to your surface wishes, your casual hopes, or your occasional moments of inspiration. It only responds to what you believe is already true, at the deepest level of your being. What you've convinced yourself is real through consistent repetition and emotional conviction. So if you're constantly, habitually, unconsciously repeating the same doubts in your inner dialogue, rehashing the same fears in your mental conversations, reinforcing the same silent frustrations in your private thoughts, you're programming your mind to perpetuate and multiply the very struggles you're desperately asking to escape. You're creating more of what you don't want while wondering why what you do want never seems to manifest. That's why most people stay stuck in repeating cycles of limitation, frustration, and unfulfilled desires. They're unknowingly working against themselves, using their creative power to reinforce the very conditions they want to change. And it's exactly why the few who understand this principle and apply it consistently create what others call miracles. But what are actually the natural results of aligned consciousness? The subconscious mind is not logical in the way your conscious mind operates. It doesn't respond to facts, evidence, or rational arguments. It doesn't analyze whether your thoughts are beneficial or harmful, whether your words are wise or foolish, whether your beliefs are helping or hurting you. It responds to three things with mechanical precision: repetition, emotion, and conviction. That's why affirmations work when they're done correctly. Not because they sound pleasant or make you feel temporarily better, but because they are actually commands being sent to your subconscious mind. Every time you speak a word with genuine belief behind it, every time you declare something with authentic emotion supporting it, you're planting a seed in the fertile soil of your subconscious. And the subconscious, like rich earth, always grows whatever seeds are planted in it, regardless of whether those seeds will produce flowers or weeds. But here's the truth that most people carefully avoid acknowledging. You're always affirming something through your habitual speech patterns. You're always planting seeds through your repetitive thoughts. You're always programming your subconscious through your dominant mental and emotional states. Every complaint you voice repeatedly, every excuse you offer consistently, every limiting phrase like, "I can't," "This always happens to me," "Nothing ever changes," or "I never get what I want," those are affirmations too, just directed in the wrong direction. They're commands being sent to your subconscious mind with emotional energy behind them, programming it to create more experiences that match those declarations. Your subconscious mind is completely neutral, like a sophisticated computer that simply executes whatever program you install. It's not judging what's good or bad for you, what will make you happy or miserable, what will help you grow or keep you stuck. It obeys whatever you impress upon it, most consistently with the strongest emotional charge, regardless of whether those impressions serve your highest good. That's why fear is so incredibly powerful in shaping your reality. Fear is not just an emotion you experience, it's a programming tool that operates with devastating effectiveness. Fear is emotionally charged with intense energy. It's often repeated obsessively in your thoughts, and without conscious awareness of what you're doing. You're programming struggle, limitation, and defeat into your reality through the vehicle of fearful thinking. As I began to understand and teach these principles, I started to notice a pattern. People weren't fundamentally weak, or inherently unlucky or destined to struggle. They were hypnotized by their own words, entranced by their own habitual thought patterns, unconsciously casting spells of limitation upon themselves through careless speech and undisciplined thinking. They were saying one thing consciously: "I want to be successful. I desire abundance. I hope things will improve." But repeating something entirely different in their private mental dialogue. And the subconscious mind, with perfect faithfulness, obeyed the private belief rather than the public wish, manifested the inner conviction rather than the outer desire. So I began teaching people to speak differently, not to adopt fake positivity that denies reality or pretends everything is perfect when it's not, but to command reality with clear intention, to use their words like a precisely crafted tool, sharp with purpose, deliberate in direction, and faithful to their vision rather than their fears. And I want you to pause right now and think deeply about this penetrating question. What are you affirming when you talk to yourself in the silence of your own mind? When things don't go according to your plans, when unexpected challenges arise, when disappointments occur, what's your immediate, automatic, internal reaction? What story do you tell yourself? What explanations do you offer? What conclusions do you draw? That spontaneous internal response. That's the real affirmation that's shaping your reality. That's what your subconscious mind is listening to most carefully, recording most accurately, and responding to most powerfully. Your casual, unguarded, emotional reactions to life's challenges are programming your future experiences more than any formal affirmations you might repeat during deliberate practice sessions. If you want to experience what most people call miracles, which are simply aligned manifestations of consciousness, you must stop negotiating with doubt, stop entertaining fear, stop rehearsing failure in your imagination. You must stop repeating what you don't want with emotional energy, because the subconscious mind cannot filter sarcasm, cannot interpret fear as anything other than instruction, cannot distinguish between what you want to avoid and what you want to attract. The subconscious only receives what's spoken with emotion and belief, regardless of whether that emotion is positive or negative, whether that belief serves you or limits you. It's completely impartial in its response. It simply manifests whatever you've impressed upon it, most consistently and powerfully. You're not cursed by circumstances beyond your control. You're not victims of fate or bad luck or unfair treatment. You're simply repeating the wrong spells, casting the wrong incantations, programming the wrong outcomes through unconscious thought patterns that you've never examined or challenged. And once you understand that fundamental truth, once you realize that you have been the author of your own experience all along, you can begin the sacred work of rewriting the program, word by word, thought by thought, belief by belief, until your inner world reflects the outer world you truly desire to experience. Let me show you how this profound truth plays out in the real world, through the remarkable story of someone whose success demonstrates the practical power of subconscious programming. Sarah Blakely was selling fax machines door to door, facing rejection after rejection, earning modest income, with no investors believing in her potential, no background in fashion or business, and no one in her life telling her she was destined for extraordinary success. But Sarah possessed one thing that most people completely ignore, overlook, or underestimate: a deliberately trained subconscious mind that had been programmed for success through years of consistent mental discipline. Since the age of 16, Sarah had maintained a daily practice that most people would consider simple or even silly. She would write down one specific phrase over and over again, impressing it into her consciousness through repetition. I'm going to invent something that will change the world. She didn't know what that invention would be. She had no clear picture of the specific product or service. She couldn't see the path or predict the timing. But she believed in the statement with complete conviction, felt it with genuine emotion, and repeated it with unwavering consistency, until it became more real to her than her current circumstances. She impressed that empowering belief so deeply into her subconscious mind, planted that seed so firmly in the soil of her consciousness, that when the idea for Spanx finally came to her, she didn't hesitate with doubt, didn't delay with fear, didn't seek endless approval from others. She acted immediately and decisively, because her subconscious mind had already been programmed to expect breakthrough, innovation, and world-changing success. Sarah understood intuitively what Florence Scovel Shinn taught explicitly. You must protect your vision from the contamination of doubt. She spoke about her idea only to people who wouldn't kill it with fear, skepticism, or negative predictions. She treated her vision like it was already a living reality. Even when no one else could see it, believe in it, or understand its potential. That's exactly how effective subconscious reprogramming works in practical application. You don't need to see the complete picture before you begin. You don't need to understand every step of the journey before you take the first one. You need full conviction in the outcome, complete belief in the possibility, and absolute faith in your ability to manifest what you've impressed upon your subconscious mind. You need consistent repetition backed by authentic emotion. And you need protective silence. When doubt comes knocking at the door of your consciousness, trying to plant seeds of fear and limitation in your carefully cultivated mental garden. Sarah didn't manifest extraordinary success through random chance, lucky breaks, or being in the right place at the right time. She created her breakthrough by repeatedly training her subconscious mind to believe in something magnificent before there was any visible proof, before anyone else shared her vision, before external circumstances supported her dreams. And crucially, she didn't dilute her programming with negative words, contradictory statements, or expressions of doubt that would have confused her subconscious and weakened her manifestation. She maintained mental discipline, speech discipline, and emotional discipline until her inner reality became her outer experience. That's what most people do unconsciously. They speak their vision occasionally when they're feeling inspired, then immediately sabotage it with casual doubt, contradictory statements, and fearful predictions. They plant seeds of possibility, then water them with worry, fertilize them with fear, and wonder why their garden produces weeds instead of flowers. The subconscious mind always responds to the most repeated command, the most emotionally charged message, the most consistently impressed belief. And in Sarah's case, that command was always forward-moving, always possibility, focused, always aligned with breakthrough and success rather than limitation and struggle. Eventually, her product became a global sensation that transformed an entire industry. She became the youngest self-made female billionaire in America, achieving financial success that most people only dream about. But the real victory, the true miracle, came long before the money appeared, long before the world recognized her genius. The real transformation occurred when she made the conscious choice to believe in her potential, and kept speaking that belief, kept feeling that conviction, kept programming that reality, until it became as natural and automatic as breathing. That's the power you hold right now, in this very moment, regardless of your current circumstances or past experiences. If you're willing to speak with that kind of consistency, that level of conviction, that depth of faith, your subconscious mind won't resist your programming. It will respond with the same faithfulness it has always shown, manifesting whatever you impress upon it most powerfully and persistently. If you want to use your subconscious mind to manifest meaningful change in your life, you must treat it like the sacred ground it truly is. You don't plant chaos and expect peace to grow. You don't sow fear and expect to harvest courage. You don't program limitation and expect to experience abundance. You must plant exactly what you want to harvest, and you must do it with consistency, emotion, and unwavering conviction until the seeds take root and begin to manifest in your external experience. Start immediately with conscious control of your words, the most powerful programming tool at your disposal. The moment you wake up each morning, before you check your phone and absorb other people's energy, before you repeat yesterday's thought patterns, before you slip into unconscious mental habits, Speak what you choose to create rather than what you fear might happen. Not what you wish would occur someday. Not what you hope might be possible if everything goes perfectly. But what you decide will be your reality, because you're programming it with conviction and faith. Say these words out loud with genuine feeling behind them. Whisper them if you need to maintain privacy, but speak them with emotion and belief. Everything is always working in my favor, even when I can't see how. I receive what I believe, and I believe in my success. I am already aligned with the life I desire, and it's manifesting now. The subconscious doesn't care whether these statements are currently true in your external circumstances. It doesn't analyze whether they're logical or reasonable, based on your present situation. It only responds to the repetition, emotion, and conviction behind the words you speak consistently. You're not lying to yourself when you make these declarations before they manifest. You're leading yourself toward the reality you're choosing to create. You're programming the most powerful creative force you possess, your subconscious mind, to work on your behalf instead of against your desires. And you must become absolutely ruthless about what you allow in your inner dialogue, your private thoughts, your emotional reactions to challenging circumstances. That means consciously cutting off thoughts that don't match your new programming, deliberately choosing new reactions when you feel fear, rejection, disappointment, or frustration. Because every emotional reaction, every internal response, every mental pattern is an instruction being sent to your subconscious mind. And your subconscious doesn't know when you're being sarcastic, when you're exaggerating for effect, when you're just venting temporarily. It records everything with perfect accuracy and works to manifest whatever you've impressed upon it most consistently. That's why mental discipline matters infinitely more than temporary motivation. Because you won't always feel inspired, optimistic, or confident. Life will present challenges that test your faith, circumstances that contradict your vision, people who doubt your dreams and try to convince you to be realistic. But you can always choose to repeat the right words, think the right thoughts, maintain the right emotional state regardless of external conditions. And those words, thoughts, and emotions become your new program, your new reality, your new destiny unfolding through the perfect operation of subconscious law. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I never get what I want," and you consciously stop that pattern and replace it with, "Everything I desire is already mine," you delay the manifestation that's trying to reach you and accelerate the fulfillment of your heart's desires. But every time you declare with conviction, "It's already mine, it's already done, it's already on its way," you close the gap between belief and manifestation, between inner programming and outer experience, between vision and reality. Repetition rewires your mental circuitry, creating new neural pathways that support your desired reality. Emotion energizes your programming, giving it the power needed to manifest in physical form. So repeat the words that reflect the life you're consciously building, not the one you're trying to escape. Speak like the person you're becoming, not like the version of yourself that's still healing from past disappointments. That's how you begin to use the subconscious mind with true power. Not to wish hopefully for miracles that might happen if you're lucky, but to expect miracles as the natural result of aligned consciousness and disciplined programming. Words are incredibly powerful tools for programming your subconscious, but words combined with vivid imagination, that's where the real magic begins, where transformation accelerates, where miracles become inevitable rather than accidental. The subconscious mind doesn't just respond to what you say with your voice. It responds even more powerfully to what you see consistently in your mind's eye, especially when genuine emotion is involved in the visualization process. That's why conscious visualization is not a new age gimmick or wishful thinking exercise. It's a precise language that the subconscious mind understands perfectly, responds to immediately, and acts upon faithfully. When you imagine something vividly and repeatedly, when you see it clearly, feel it authentically, and experience it emotionally in your imagination, your subconscious mind accepts it as accomplished fact rather than future possibility. The subconscious cannot distinguish between a vivid mental experience charged with emotion and an actual physical experience. Both register as real. Both create the same neural patterns. Both program the same responses and expectations. That's why fear works so quickly and devastatingly in people's lives. Fear creates intense mental images of disaster, failure, and loss. Those images become instructions sent to the subconscious. The subconscious then works to manifest circumstances that match those fearful images, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of struggle and limitation. But you can use that exact same process deliberately in your favor, instead of unconsciously against yourself. Every day, even if just for a few focused minutes. Close your eyes and picture the life you've consciously chosen to create. Not the life you're trying to escape from. Not the circumstances you're currently struggling with. But the reality you are deliberately building through conscious programming. Feel deeply into the version of yourself who's already living that desired reality. See clearly how that successful version of you walks through the world. How they speak to themselves and others. How they think about challenges and opportunities. How they carry themselves with confidence and certainty. Make your visualization detailed and specific rather than vague and general. Make it familiar through repetition rather than foreign and distant. Because what you imagine repeatedly with emotional involvement becomes familiar to your subconscious mind. And once something becomes familiar at the subconscious level, your mind begins automatically moving your conscious actions, daily decisions, and even your awareness toward that reality. You'll start noticing new ideas appearing in your consciousness, new people entering your life who can help you, new opportunities presenting themselves that align with your vision. That's not coincidence, luck, or random good fortune. That's your subconscious mind, filtering the infinite possibilities of reality to match what you've been consistently feeding it. Through disciplined imagination and emotional programming, your subconscious acts like a sophisticated filtering system, highlighting and attracting experiences that match your dominant programming, while filtering out opportunities that don't align with your impressed beliefs and expectations. The imagination is not a toy for entertainment or escapism. It's a precision tool for consciousness programming. Most people use their imagination unconsciously to rehearse disaster, to relive past failures and disappointments, to prepare mentally for pain and rejection. Then they wonder why life keeps delivering more experiences that match those mental rehearsals. Use your imagination differently. Use it with conscious precision and strategic intent. See the specific outcomes you want to experience, and see them clearly, repeatedly, emotionally until they stop feeling like distant dreams and start feeling like inevitable realities. Because that's when the subconscious responds most powerfully. Not when you wish hopefully for something that might happen, but when you remember emotionally a future that feels as real as any past experience. You don't need a perfect plan mapped out in complete detail. You don't need more time to prepare, more evidence to convince you, or someone else to give you permission to start programming your subconscious for success. What you need is to take complete control of the one thing that shapes everything else in your experience: your subconscious mind. This is not about adopting fake positivity that denies obvious reality or pretends problems don't exist. This is about achieving real alignment between your words, your thoughts, your emotions, and your desires. These elements are shaping your future reality right now, in this very moment, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you're paying attention or not. The question is, will you keep unconsciously repeating the mental and emotional patterns of your past, thereby recreating similar experiences in your future? Or will you start consciously commanding your future by deliberately programming new patterns into your subconscious mind? Everything in your life experience changes the moment you stop reacting unconsciously to circumstances and start choosing consciously how to respond. The moment you stop saying, "I hope," and start declaring, "It is done." The moment you stop wishing and start knowing. That crucial shift from wanting consciousness to knowing consciousness is what moves the invisible forces of manifestation in your favor. It's what transforms you from someone who begs reality to change into someone who commands reality to conform to their vision. Don't wait for the external world to change so you can finally believe in your dreams. Change what you believe at the deepest level. Program what you know to be true, and watch as the external world reorganizes itself to match your inner programming. Every miracle that has ever occurred started as a quiet decision made in the privacy of someone's consciousness. A powerful sentence spoken in private, an unshakable belief held when nothing made logical sense, a programming decision that contradicted all visible evidence. That's the seed from which miracles grow. And the subconscious mind, faithful and obedient servant that it is, begins immediately turning that seed into tangible form, manifesting in the physical world what has been impressed upon it through repetition, emotion, and conviction. You are not here on this earth merely to survive, to get by, to endure whatever circumstances happen to appear. You are here to create consciously, to manifest deliberately, to demonstrate the power of aligned consciousness, working in harmony with universal law. So speak as if your desired reality is already yours, because at the level of programmed consciousness, it is. Think as if your goals are already accomplished, because in the realm of impressed belief, they are. Feel as if you're already living your vision, because in the dimension of knowing consciousness, you are. And then watch with amazement as your external circumstances begin shifting to match your internal programming. Watch as opportunities appear, as people show up to help, as resources become available, as solutions emerge from unexpected sources. Because the moment you stop doubting your creative power and start deciding to use it consciously, your subconscious mind becomes your most faithful servant instead of your unconscious master. And what most people call miracles become your normal, natural, expected experience of life. If this message has reminded you of the incredible power you've always possessed, but may have forgotten how to use consciously, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Let this be your daily reminder of your creative potential, your mental reset when you need to remember who you really are, your space for truth when the world tries to convince you to accept limitation. Now I want to hear from you in the comments below. What are you choosing to believe and program into your subconscious mind from this moment forward? What reality are you deciding to create through the power of aligned consciousness? Your answer to that question will determine everything that unfolds in your experience from this day forward.